good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here at the TSL 2022 International Schools Debates, and we always start off with the Teacher Champions Exchange. And I'm delighted to say that this morning we have a special guest speaker. She's going to speak for about 40 minutes, I think, and chat with everyone. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Joanna Reid Johnson. She's at the Institute of Education at the University of Reading. She's the school director for climate and sustainability education there. Joanna completed a PhD in the field of education for sustainable development in 2009. And since then, she's been working in the field of teacher education, both in the UK and in Singapore. She has several book chapters and academic papers published in the field relating specifically to education for sustainable development in schools and higher education in the UK, in Southern Africa and Southeast Asia. So without further ado, the floor is yours. Jo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and welcome everybody wherever you are in the world. It's fantastic that we've now got this technology and we can all connect up. And I'm really excited to be presenting to you about climate justice and also joining a panel later this week, as well as I will outline to you our very exciting work at the University of Reading for the National Action Plan for Climate Education and the initial teacher education framework that we've developed, and invite any of you who would like to take part in our pilot to do so and perhaps get in touch with me separately. I'm sure, Kirsty, we can share my email with people. So yeah, I'm going to just share some slides with you. And just before I start, if you do have any questions, is there a chat function? I think you can add some questions to, question and answers, and then at the end we'll have some time for that. So please do post any questions in the chat. And there we are. So what I've done today, I mean, this is such a huge topic. And because this conference is about climate justice, then that's what I focused on. But I'll talk about some of the intersectionality, and a lot of the time, although we might be talking about climate education, we do go into the area of the environment. It's quite a complex thing in terms of definitions, so I won't go into all of that, but I think if I highlight the Sustainable Development Goals, I think that's an important point too. A lot of these resources that I've put on and shared with you today have either come from UNESCO, UNEP, also through RISC, who we work with in Reading, and the Liverpool World Centre have some brilliant resources. So as teachers and teacher educators, there's so many resources there, but it's just making sure we use things that are correct and we don't provide misconceptions. And also, I think the important thing about climate justice, a lot of questions have been raised recently about the politicization of this, but actually, you know, there is a political side to these things, but obviously in education, we have to be careful about that. So what my response to that is that we're raising the debate, we're getting people to think about the issues, and we're getting people to understand what climate education is. So here are some big questions for you to ponder over today, this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you are. What is social justice? What is climate justice? Because there is an interconnection between the two. How the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals may interlink with that thinking. And very importantly, you know, for me, education is a key player in all of this, and hence why I did my research in that field. Hopefully, you're all familiar with these Sustainable Development Goals with the target for 2030. Often we can connect in with each of these individually, and you know, in schools I know that we target some of these individually, But I think what I wanted to highlight with you today is the interconnection between them. This is the, so think of it as a round map and we've got connections across them. So if you're not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, it's probably worth, you know, just Googling and going to those links and having a look at them. There's a lot of comprehensive information in there that's been published. And there's lots of opportunities for engaging young people. But what we've done today is really focus this talk around the connections between Sustainable Development Goal 13, which you can see on there, climate action. I want you to also think about sustainable inequalities, which is Sustainable Goal 10 down there on the, what time, 7 o'clock. And also number 4, which is to do with education for all, which I think is important for all of us around the world in considering that. I'm going to show you this very short video because I think it's important. You'll come across this term intersectionality and it can be a little bit confusing, but I think this is useful for you to listen to Kimberly. Eva, if you could just tell me if it's playing once we skip these ads. Apologies for this bit.
I think, were you able to share the sound?
Oh.
I don't think we can hear properly. If you could stop sharing.
Okay. Just a minute.
And
yeah. I tell you what I'll do. I'll
so why don't you first stop the video now?
Yeah.
Have the video ready on the screen. Oh, yeah. We all do that. Don't worry. What do we? You wouldn't believe what we do.
Just bear with me a second. Am I still sharing? Am I?
Not yet. So please have the video ready to share. Once you click on share screen, it will ask you if you would like to share the audio.
With the sound. Yeah, audio.
Those two squares.
Please just chat amongst yourselves and think about some questions while I just sort this out.
That's okay. No one yet is a Zoom master.
It's the suspense, actually. You're building the suspense. Yay. I really want to find out what Kimberly Crenshaw has to say now.
Right. Yeah, so escape that and share.
I can say to the teachers who've just joined us, feel free to share your videos if you like to. Don't have to, but feel free.
So the screen is here. If you could start the video, move the video to the beginning point.
Yeah, that's there. Do I need to do something on the sound at the top?
No, it should be fine.
Let's just try it.
And you can make it full screen if you want.
Can you hear it?
Yes, it's a little quiet.
Okay, let me just put it back.
I just need to turn your volume up.
Yep.
And would you like to check the volume of the YouTube screen there?
Yep. Yeah. Right. Hopefully. Share sound movie. Okay, full screen.
Intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves and they create obstacles that often are not understood within conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. Intersectionality isn't so much a grand theory, it's a prism for understanding certain kinds of problems. African American girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. That's probably a race and a gender problem. It's not just a race problem, it's not just a gender problem. So I encourage people to think about how the convergence of race stereotypes or gender stereotypes might actually play out in the classroom, between teachers and students, between students and other students, between students and administrators, and commit themselves to understanding that as a way of intervening and providing equal educational opportunity for all students, regardless of their identities. Identity isn't simply a self-contained unit. It is a relationship between people in history, people in communities, people in institutions. So schools do a good job when they understand that and when they commit themselves to curricular development, to opportunities in the school for all students to understand the histories that have brought us to this particular moment. You can't change outcomes without understanding how they've come about. So independent schools can take the lead on that to be responsive to their student populations and to the communities out of which the students come.
So I think that's I'll just change my screen now back to here. So what Kimberly's saying is, you know, we need to talk about social justice as well as climate justice because they're interconnected. And so this intersectionality is really important as well when we talk about climate action, which is Sustainable Development Goal 13. And I'm just going to show you this other video, which again is about 5 minutes long. So yeah, put your feet up, grab a drink or something. And yeah, thinking about how in your mind when you're listening to all of this, how these sustainable goals interlink and how important it is. So in terms of social justice and climate justice, that we actually do have unconscious biases. And, you know, I've had time to reflect on this when I did my research in South Africa on education for sustainable development in comparison to England. And as a white Western researcher going to South Africa, working in Black communities, it was quite fascinating, perhaps not really understanding it totally at the time, but later on. So I'm hoping this link will share directly and you'll hear it.
Yeah.
My name is Naisha Khan, and I am a second-generation Bangladeshi settler on stolen and unceded Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiamu land. I've been a climate justice organizer for nearly 2 years with the organization Sustainability Teens and Banking on a Better Future. And in this episode, I'm going to explore through my personal experiences why it is essential to view the movement through an intersectional lens. When we imagine climate activists, we often imagine someone who is white, and this is intentional. The climate movement, specifically starting with the conservation movement, is deeply rooted in white supremacy. From the outset, it focused on saving the environment from the effects of climate change, but in doing so, it has failed to protect the racialized communities affected by the same environmental degradation. It has erased these struggles and the inequity that they experience as their communities have been ravaged by climate change. This history of exclusion impacts BIPOC in the climate movement. Our work continues to be erased, white supremacy continues to manifest, and it continues to harm BIPOC. I have personally experienced micro and macro aggressions, tokenism, and just a general lack of cultural understanding that has made me want to leave this movement at times. I feel like a resource or a prop, often asked to speak up about any race-related issue, whether it be BLM or Indigenous sovereignty, because I'm just automatically categorized as this non-white organizer, regardless of the fact that the struggles of different communities and individuals are unique. Despite this reality, there are still times when I have felt safe, heard, and respected in this movement. And the key to these spaces was an understanding of intersectionality. But what is intersectionality? The concept of intersectionality was coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw in her paper, Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex. Intersectionality recognizes that we live in a society characterized by multiple systems of oppression, including sexism, colonialism, and racism. And these systems are all intertwined. These systems of oppression do not work exclusively to oppress one specific group at a time, but instead overlap and work together to compound oppression for intersecting groups. Within the climate movement, we need to be aware of and take action to deconstruct these systems of oppression. Otherwise, we are replicating the same systems of colonialism and capitalism that caused this crisis in the first place. The key to successful inclusive movements that center marginalized voices is intersectionality. Here are some of my asks to ensure intersectionality is upheld. Center and uplift BIPOC voices. No matter how educated you are, you'll never have the lived experience of someone else. You'll never truly understand their emotions or the depth of their oppression. So instead of speaking for others, work to uplift marginalized voices so that they can speak for themselves. This is especially important because BIPOC communities are at the center of the climate crisis and have extensive knowledge and lived experience to share. Unlearn white supremacy, but not at the cost of my emotional labor. There are so many existing resources out there, Black, Indigenous, and POC written content that you can find online. Do not unnecessarily labor the BIPOC folk in your life because this work is hard for us. It is tiring, and I'm more than just a resource. I'm a person who needs rest and care. Incorporating hope. Indigenous and other communities of color have been practicing sustainability for years, whilst building mutual aid and other practices of community care. We have the solution, we just need to center different voices to make it a reality. And lastly, celebrate BIPOC joy. Too often, racialized folk are reduced to sob stories and to our traumas when, in fact, we're full-fledged people capable of experiencing joy and love. For me, I am slowly starting to center joy in my organizing. Systems of oppression are rooted in hate. Hate for the other, hate for ourselves. But by centering joy, especially as a marginalized person, I am committing an act of anti-oppression. When fighting the climate crisis, it is absolutely necessary to use an intersectional and anti-oppressive lens. This both works to center marginalized and racialized voices, but it also works to dismantle centuries of oppression that caused this emergency in the first place. I know it may seem like a lot to care about all of these different
So hopefully that gives you a sense of the importance of this intersectionality. And I don't want it to sound like doom and gloom, because the whole idea of climate education, social and climate justice is that we provide hope. And there's what I would do with my training teachers or with younger students is to get them to think about their own positionality, where they've come from. So I would have shared, if we had longer, my own positionality of where I've come from, you know, and think about that. Yes, you know, you see me on this screen, I'm a white Western woman, middle class, etc. But I've also got some other complexities behind all of that, having lived in Africa. And you could argue that I've lived as a white supremacy with in a colonial state. But actually that brings something different to the table about who I am and how I view this agenda. And I think it's really important that you do that with your students, or if you're training teachers, you get them to think about that, because that's the important part. You know, where are they coming from? And let's think about those marginalized communities who are impacted the greatest by this climate change. So if we look at the individual aspects of our sustainable development goals, there's elements you can pull out and create these connections. So I'm just sharing with you the overall requirements of sustainable goal 10.
Jo, we can still see your video screen, sorry, not your
right,
PowerPoint
apologies.
at the moment.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Thank you for letting me know.
That's okay.
I will just stop that and I will come back in.
Welcome those teachers that have just joined us. If you've got any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. Jo's going to have some time at the end of her presentation to answer some of your questions and tell you more about the new teaching framework they've developed at Reading University for climate change and sustainability. There we go. Perfect. We can see your PowerPoint again now, Jo.
Great, thanks. So, yeah. So we're talking about the intersectionality. So I'm not going to talk through all of these points, but this is something you could go away and look at again and familiarise yourself with in terms of sustainable development goals. And we all know how important it is that all learners have access to education, no matter what, you know, where they're from, what age they are. This is really important, and you know, whatever their inequalities might be, it's about thinking about how we connect to those inequalities and make it accessible. And then these are the target points to do with the climate action. Again, you can look at these from UNESCO, from UNEP, and there's lots and lots of different resources that you can tap into, video links that you can use to stimulate these conversations with the people that you're educating. And if we have a look down this one, we're talking about resilience, integration of climate education measures. So we're looking at data and strategies and, you know, really kind of raising these discussions and debates about climate change so that people understand it, but they also understand from their own context, what bits can they engage with? You know, how important is it? What do they need to do? How is it creating marginalized communities? And Hela Lotz-Sisiska from South Africa is a professor in this field, and she talks about us looking out to look in. And the last video that I just shared with you, she was talking about that actually these marginalized communities have lots of approaches to being sustainable because it's an inherent part of their culture and their community, and that there's lots of lessons that can be learned from those parts of the world. So with Sustainable Goal 10, we need to be looking at reducing inequalities. And these again are things you can discuss with your students about social protection, agency, you know, being able to create hope and action and dignity. And why do these inequalities affect their long-term social economic development? You know, what is it about these different genders or ages or identities or religions that are not allowing them to have equality? Why do they feel like that? You know, so the most marginalized communities are often poorer. They're the ones impacted with the climate change. They're impacted by disease. And of course, COVID-19 has impacted on all of us, but in particular, the most vulnerable. So here are some examples. If you're thinking, what do we mean by inequality? Well, some parts of the world, there's women and children who don't get access to healthcare. And there's simple diseases like measles and tuberculosis that we have all been inoculated against, that they may not have. There's older people. We're seeing lots of refugees and migrants moving around the world. So we need to think about how are they being discriminated against? What are the opportunities do they have? And actually, when these people come into our communities, we embrace them. We can learn so much from these different cultures. 1 in 5 people are reported as being discriminated against on the grounds. Oh, I can't just see that bit. Ground of discriminate prohibited by international human rights law. So, you know, there are laws against this as well, but these are things depending on the age of the children or the adults that you're teaching, that you can discuss and debate. And here are some more statistics to do with reducing inequalities in the Gini index that you can tap into. So here, just have a look across these. The Gini index is falling in some countries where we have income inequality. I mean, even in the West, we have income inequality. And then down there, the most vulnerable groups being hardest hit. This is to do with the pandemic, that part there. So before we had some falling, but now obviously with COVID, this has impacted on everyone around the world. And now we also have the Ukraine war, which again is impacting on food security. So, you know, these debates are really important about what's happening in the world, not just from obviously climate change, but it's climate change that can have a big impact. And here is a quote by Jayarajaman, who's an Indian climate policy expert, and there is a link there that you can look at. So it's not just climate change that we're dealing with, as I've just said. It's about equality and equity. It's about peace and security. And all these things are quite complex and things are interrelated. So for me, what's important when we're educating about this is that we're getting people to feel more comfortable with that complexity of things. And systems thinking is a big part of that. And that's why it's important to connect up different elements of these sustainable development goals. If we're educating young people, it's an easy way to tap into and get them to think about the interconnections. So this is an activity you could try with your students. I'm conscious of the time, so I probably Kirsty, would you want me to go into this link and just quickly show?
If you've got time, go ahead. If you're not,
Okay.
If you don't feel you've got time, then don't worry, we can share it with the group afterwards.
You basically will click on that link there. I'm just going to show you because you will have access to these, and then you'll go into the link, and I'll just reshare in a second. Oh no, apologies, wrong one. So what you can do with your students is just to get them to think about examples of equality or examples of inequality. And here are some things that you can just drag and drop in. It's quite small on my screen. I don't know how big it is on yours. This one says, a teacher gives extra help to pupils who need it. So is that an example of equality, inequality? Not sure. For me, I would probably put it there. Okay, and then someone is treated badly because they look or sound different from other people. this can go into inequality, I would say. So you can have those discussions with your students, you know, they can work in groups and then come together, and, you know, some people may think slightly different than others. Someone is involved in a successful campaign to change an unjust law that oppresses them. So are we looking at fairness or unfairness? Where would we drop it? If we're not sure, we'd put it there. And depending on the age of the students you're working with, will depend on how they respond to this. And it's about that discussion rather than the actual, is it right or is it wrong? All right. And I'm going to stop sharing that now, but it's something you can play with and think about how you might use it in your own teaching. There's many things that you can use in your teaching to think about equality, equity, and liberation. We can see that here in this picture. You know, do we put a wall up? There was some recent discussions about a royal trip to in the UK, the royals. I can't think where they went to, but in terms of how it was managed and staged, and there was some controversy over that, because quite easily you could drop the wall to allow people in, as depicted in that image. Right. So empowering young people, this is the really crucial part, is how do we empower young people? And I've read research about pedagogies of participation being really important. So often within educational systems, we have pedagogies of power. You know, the teacher is the more superior one to the children, but actually it's about empowering young people. How do we break down those barriers to get people to think about climate justice through the curriculum and through planning? And we need to empower those young people to engage, to think, and not necessarily think, well, they're too young and they can't do that, because it's surprising what young people can do. I'm going to share with you just a little bit of insight into climate justice in schools from my perspective, but obviously wherever you are in the world, I would like you to go away and think about where is climate justice in your school, in your educational system, in your policies. Is it happening? How is it happening? To what extent is it happening? So we have something called Ofsted who inspect our schools, and I'm sure you do have something similar in your parts of the world. And you know, we can find like little clues as to where it's mentioned. So personal, social, health education, spiritual, moral, cultural, social development. You know, this is the way it's kind of integrated, but it's not that explicit, but it's in there. Also, it's threaded through different opportunities, as I said, PSHE, citizenship, British values. It also comes into certain subjects. We've just recently, in April 2022, had a strategy launched to do with sustainability and climate education in England, and it's still emphasising the connections through science and geography, and not necessarily integrated throughout schools as a whole school approach. So I think it's important to think about, and where do these sustainable development goals link in? So I just want you to think about that and go away and look at it in your own context, because it will be different. You know, I've worked in South Africa and seen it there. I've seen it in Singapore, which often is quite a Western educational system anyway. But, you know, to what extent a whole school approach ethos is being adopted, and where is it visible? Often things will be added on and not necessarily integral to everything. Is intersectionality discussed? Critical thinking, debate and discussion happens across many different subjects, but how interconnected is that happening? So really, I just wanted to share this to get you thinking about climate justice and whether there's a whole school approach to it in your context. The Eco Schools is the programme that I've explored in more detail. And again, you know, there's lots of targets for schools to aim towards and tick boxes, etc. But underneath it are the principles embedded in the school ethos. Are they embedded in the not just the curriculum, the community, the culture, and the community, the culture, the curriculum, and the campus. You know, it needs to be integrated as a whole 4 Cs. So taking action, making changes, sending ripples, it's about getting those people in your school communities to do this, not just, you know, your head teachers, your governors, your all the teachers, not just one eco warrior, but everybody. Get the children, the young people, in particular in secondary schools. I think it's more challenging because the way in which our curriculums have been siloed into subjects. But there are opportunities, and it's about us to make that happen. This is just an activity that you can think about. You'll be able to download these cards from the Oxfam site there, and you could adapt those criteria that are there, but you're basically ranking them in this diamond-shaped design and getting children and young people to discuss these ideas. And those criteria could be adapted to whatever level of children that you're working with, or even adults. So think about, just before I finish the last few slides, about how young people could take action in the classroom. Here's an example from Fridays for the Future, something Oxfam have done, something your children could connect into. And then there's things like Earth Day, you know, as a whole school event. But I think having one-off events doesn't create that momentum of change, but it's a good starting point. You know, everything that you do is still important. But use these video clips as things to promote and stimulate thought and discussion. But be careful that the sources you are using don't create misconceptions. You know, avoid misconceptions. If you're not sure about what you're presenting, choose to leave it out, pick something else. Be really sure that the sources are providing that correct conception for those young people, because this will influence them. You know, you can use pictures like this to show the disparity between different parts of the world in terms of what do they eat. You know, actually this shows you that on the right, these communities are more sustainable than this family on the left. You know, everything is processed there on the left. On the right, you've got everything that's come from the land. They're living off the land. They've learned how to live off the land. And, you know, they will forage whatever they need to survive. And we go to the supermarket. You know, on the left, this is more like, well, actually, it's not like my shopping list, but, you know, you get the idea. That's more like I go to the supermarket, whereas these people on the right are going to the market, or they're growing it themselves. So it's a good way of stimulating discussion. You can also get poems. There's many poems that you could take and read with students, or get students to write their own poems, create their own music. Think of, you know, ways that stimulate and engage them and provide them with some hope. I've also included some resources here. So I'm going to just stop sharing. While I pull up the framework, I don't know if you want to see if there's any questions that anybody's got for me, and then I'll share my...
Absolutely. Laura has asked if we'll be sharing the slideshow with you. Joanna, I presume you're happy for us to do that. So yes, I'll email that out to all the teachers that have joined us this morning, probably later on this afternoon once we finish with the primary school debate. So yes, you'll have a copy of those, Laura.
And
any other questions for Jo so far?
And feel free, if you have some questions later, you think of to get in touch with me, you can just email. And
so you're welcome to share questions in the chat, or turn your microphones on if you want to, and share. So Violetta has said, quite informative presentation, thank you very much. Lindina from Seychelles said, Eco Schools is a good programme to promote sustainability in educational institution, but it will work best if it's taken up or funded by the government instead of relying on funds from NGOs.
I totally agree. I mean, this is the challenge, because in England we now have our sustainable, it's sustainability and climate education strategy. It's not a policy, so there's a difference between. So in your context, it's really good for you to go and have a look at what is strategy, what is policy, what does that mean in your context. But for us, it means it's not compulsory. And often, because our curriculum is so busy with lots of things, you know, already integrated in there, teachers may be reticent to include things. So this is why we've committed at the University of Reading and at the Institute of Education to integrate climate education and sustainability into all of our teacher training programs, and also into all our other programs in the Institute of Education. So after COP26, Professor Andrew Charlton-Perez and others, other partners, because it's all about collaboration, it's not about one institute, created a national action plan that had 9 points in it. And this is point action number 2, about integrating this into our teacher education programs. So although the government aren't saying we must do this, we just see this as a fantastic opportunity to go, yes, let's make this happen. And so we've developed this framework. It's quite simple, it's very adaptable, because we wanted it to go across all age, education for all, across all age groups. And it's also about empowering others. So it's not about someone like me coming and saying, this is what you must do, and this is how you do it, but it's about me guiding and supporting and getting others to do it, and getting them to build their confidence about doing this as well. So it's an integral process. It's organic. Not everyone's solution is going to be the same. So this is just a very simple framework from which others can take, use, adapt according to their context, according to their expertise that they can tap into. So I've forgotten who made the comment about eco schools should be funded, not just by charities. But I think it's a combination of them both, because it's about creating the whole principles of education for sustainable development is that bottom-up ground movement approach. But also what's exciting now about this strategy is that it's about top-down. It's about top-down commitment and support, because you need that. Leaders need to be there and engaging with this process. So I'm just going to, hopefully you can see this, can you? Yeah, can you? Yeah, okay. So I'm happy for this to be shared, Kirsty, and if anyone would like to, we're going to have 2 groups of people. We've got our institute, obviously, we're piloting it across all of our programs, early years, primary school, training, secondary, FE, further education, and in the university as a higher education institute. And then other institutes are taking it and piloting it, and then we're going to have a methodology for evaluation. So they're engaging in it as a whole process. Some people are saying, oh, we probably can't commit totally, we're going to do a bit. So really it's up to you as to what you do and how you do it, but we'd love to collaborate. I mean, the whole essence of this and what makes this move forward is collaboration. So that's the aims and learning outcomes really came from this paper by Thew et al, which came out of COP26, because it just showed really simply about the important knowledge, the attitudes, values and behaviours, the competences and capabilities. And it kind of allowed us to have a nice progression so that, you know, up front you're providing some sort of knowledge and input, but also you're talking about the attitudes, values and competences, and then about actions. Remember, we always want to create hope. So a lot of the stories can be doom and gloom, but at the end of the day, we want to create hope for people. So how the sessions have been divided up is 3 sections, A, B, and C. And each of those 3 sections have also been divided into 2 between university taught sessions and school sessions, because a lot of our teacher education programs involve students going into schools. So we've built it up. I mentioned earlier about exploring your own teacher positionality. So that's kind of the first section, teaching or educating people about what climate change is. We talk about in the second phase B about climate justice. So some of the stuff I've shared with you. And we have lots of things to promote that thinking. So for the bit on positionality, you know, David Attenborough's got some great witness statement and video clips. We have videos from our own alumni, Ella Gilbert, who is a climate scientist. And then in section B, a lot of the resources, as I've said, come from the Liverpool World Centre, Oxfam, UNESCO, etc. Because there's brilliant, you don't need to recreate these resources really, is what I'm trying to say. But it's just how you pack them together and create that interest and stimulation. And then the third section, I think the most important and exciting one, is getting people involved in action, collective action, individual action, whatever it might be, and then showcasing that so that eventually we have the whole load of case studies that we can share from different parts of the world. And also across our institute, it will be interesting to see how this provision is adapted across these different programs, because some of our programs are 3-year programs and some of them are 1-year programs. So different program directors are approaching it in slightly different ways, and we'll be sharing all the outcomes of that too. So yeah, and then they're given activities to then go into their schools to think about for each of those 3 elements. This is the B Hotel. We had a competition with some young people, and I'm conscious of the time. Right, so yeah, and really
take as long as you need, Joanna. It's your time scale that we're constricted by, so that's fine.
And you know, lots of questions here to think about. These are just given as examples, really. It's not restrictive at all, but it's a starting point for people to begin to integrate this into teacher education programs. I know some of you are in schools, so how that's adapted in schools, you know, whether you've got training teachers who are engaged, maybe that's how it can be integrated. But we have had inquiries from schools about this too. This lady here wrote the B book, so we had this competition with children in schools, and their designs were incorporated into the final B hotel that was built by a B expert, because we have quite an interesting B research team at the University of Reading. So again, it's about connecting into all those connections, you know, all those different things across our university. It's trying to connect everything in. It really is about collaborating. And I mean, that B Hotel project only came about because we managed to get some funding through a bit like a charity funding. It was from Friends of the University of Reading. But it's about, you know, it's about encouraging young people to think about the holistic aspect of a project if they were going to get involved with it. You know, it's not just about, I've got this great idea. It's about, well, how are we going to make that happen? And we need to think about the funding side of it as well. And I'm sure Kirsty has this with her job too, you know, and yeah, it's about connecting up everything and finding ways around some of those dilemmas or challenges you might have. And I think rather than framing it as problems, let's see it as challenges or dilemmas, and, you know, what are the solutions? So it's keeping that positive message going. So I'm open to questions now. Thanks for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joanna, for sharing that with us. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to put to Joanna? You're welcome to type in the chat or turn your microphone and video on and share directly. Have a chat with us.
Come and see us. We'd love to see you.
Eva, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This was inspiring. I'm wondering if you have any solutions or suggestions on how to reflect the new curriculum perspectives to the parents.
Okay. Do you mean in terms of that framework? You mean, yeah, because obviously
like bring more awareness and maybe a little bit of like a education for parents.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to get them involved as well. And different school communities can be quite variable as to the extent to which parents get involved. But the more you get those different groups involved, parents, community, there's so much you can learn from them because they've got a different expertise, experience. So I remember in South Africa at this one school I was at was there was a community group to do with, it was called Cindy. It was to do with looking after people who had HIV/AIDS, and they were growing medicinal herbs. And it was in the same vicinity as the school, just across the road. So they created a collaborative project working on that. So that the children then were educated about this growing of medicinal herbs and the whole purpose of that, because that was needed in that community. Just finding those sort of solutions and engaging parents, but not having parents kind of take control of it. I think it's really important that young people have that pedagogies of participation. They take some leadership in these things. But I think in terms of drawing on the expertise of the parents is fantastic, because there's so many diverse aspects that they can include. Great question.
Thanks, Eva. Violetta, did you have a question? I can see you pop your camera on.
No, it's very clear what have been presented. I enjoyed the presentation, and
I'd love to know, Violetta, where are you?
I'm from Skopje, North Macedonia, and I agree with you about the parents, because they can be quite a resource in their expertise in taking part in the activities of the school if they are already included in the curriculum. But in our country, the curriculum has certain amount of eco activities, whether in the program or in the extracurricular activities. But it's not that that is focused on this. And I agree that values in the system has a lot to do with this, because the value-based education is something that focuses
I totally understand, but I can only go by what I'm told is what you have.
Because climate change
that's what I invoice for. So
is something that embraces all,
it won't be till later this week. When they're back in the office.
And the values are intermingled with all SDGs.
That's fine.
So
I'll put it in the hand.
Yeah. No, it's a really important point. I would love to know a little. I don't know if anyone else can hear someone in the background.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Can anyone?
Here we go.
Yeah, Violetta, I was wondering what, in your capacity, in your, are you in a school?
Yes, I have been teaching English for over 2 decades in a primary school and
what sorts of things happen in your community?
Well, these years it's becoming a fashion. When TCL first came into my framework, my extracurricular activities, it was not that fashionable, but now it's becoming more and more commercialized. And but the essence of eco activities, what I can do in my school is connect kids and do some activities in a lot of international projects that what I can do, but in a community, there are some steps towards this, but it's developing. It's not, and the curriculum is not quite rich with this program as well.
No, interesting. Thank you, Violetta.
Yes, okay. And non-government organization are trying to do and to connect with schools and some institutions, but I think it's going to be further developed, and it's becoming more and more of a focus in our government, because our city was once pronounced as the most polluted city in the world, and it really the citizens are aware of this, and they're doing their part.
So it's really crucial, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is.
That we integrate it in whatever ways we can, where we can, and how we can.
Yes, I agree about what you said. The connections are very important, and collaboration as well, which is the SDGs 14. I think you haven't mentioned it, but it's very crucial as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Violetta. Elizabeth, I can see you've got your hand raised as well.
All right, thanks for this platform. I've really learned a lot. My question is it possible for TSL to, you know, work together with
We can't quite hear you, Elizabeth. Your connection's a little bit.
Yeah, I tried stopping the video, but it didn't work.
Perhaps turn the camera off and then speak.
Challenges of Zoom connection.
I tried closing the window, but it didn't work. Oh, she just lost it all.
Oh, no. Hopefully she's able to rejoin us and we can answer her question. I hope so.
She could put a message in chat, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Jo? Larissa, where are you joining us from? Let's see, we've got Comfort from Nigeria.
Comfort, oh, Nigeria, yeah. Hi, Comfort.
And we've got Lindana from the Seychelles. Lindana, do you want to share with us anything about the Eco Schools program in Seychelles?
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so hi, I'm Lindana from Seychelles. So for us, we have the Eco School program. It started as a bottom-up approach. Yeah. It started as there was a group of activists in environment. So they really wanted to have sustainability in the education system. So they started with clubs, we call them wildlife clubs. So it started with wildlife clubs in some schools, then it spread to other schools. And then they wanted to find a program or something that they could use. And there was the Eco School International one. But the Eco School International one, when they researched on it, they found out that some countries, they only have it in 1 or 2 schools because they didn't have funding to have it in all the schools. So we decided in Seychelles, they put forward this program to the government, and it was accepted. So the Eco School program became part of the education system of Seychelles. So it was compulsory for all the schools to implement the program. But they had, what they did, they took the international one and they put it in the Seychelles context. So we have a national Eco School program. And this program, next year, it will be 30 years in existence. So it's a program that has lived on compared to other programs. And as I mentioned, it's compulsory. So in all the schools, we do have the program, and we have 10 themes. So biodiversity is one, climate change is one. So we have all the themes, and we have it in the formal education and informal, so in projects. And we judge schools every year. So we have a teacher. The teacher is also an eco-school leader. So they have their own class they teach, their own subject. And this is just an additional responsibility, the eco-school leader. And they are responsible for implementing the program in their schools. And there is a part of the program that talks about partnership. So when we judge them, we look at how they partner to national, international organizations, how they partner with the NGOs, and also community involvement. They have a committee that is represented by the management teams in the schools, the parents on the committee. We have student representative, people from NGOs. Again, in the community, we have them represented, and they work on the action plan together for their schools. And we at the Ministry of Education, we have it here. We have a section that oversees that in the schools, and we have a section at the Ministry of Environment also that assists us. And also Ministry of Environment, they also look at the community and public aspect. So we look more at the education aspect.
Fantastic. It
Yes,
sounds fantastic that you're leading the way on this. I know there's lots of things going on around the world in different ways, but what you've just described is inspirational.
Yes, but this is because for us, the government, like we have funding from the government budget. We have it for eco schools. So we have it in the Ministry of Education, and we have another funding at the Ministry of Environment also for projects. Like we have rainwater harvesting, and we have a lot of businesses, organizations, which also funds a lot of our projects. So we bring them on board.
Yeah, please keep in touch. I'd love to hear more about it.
See, Joe, that you've shared your email in the chat. So if anyone would like to get in contact with Joanna, her email's on the chat group, but it's also on the presentations that I'll be sharing with you later as well. Sorry, Eva, to interrupt your hand going up. I just seen that Elizabeth has rejoined us. Elizabeth, are you able to hear us? Oh, there we go. Elizabeth has just shared in the chat. So is it possible for TSL to work with schools across nations for a virtual sensitization on climate issues? Oh, good question. So yes, this is one of the things, if we had time, we were going to go on to, was thinking more about how TSL can help to support you as teachers teaching sustainability and climate justice in the different local and national arenas. So we have got the community platform. If you're not familiar with that, I can share the details quickly with you on this, but this is our new online education for sustainable development platform, which is open to teachers and students. I'll share the details here. We've got learning resources available. We've got our podcasts. We've got all the videos of the summit are going to be going on here for you as well. So you can sign up as a member on here, and there's lots of teaching resources that have been contributed already. And if you're interested in contributing teaching resources as well, we're very happy to have those from you. I'll share this link in the group as well. The other upcoming plan that TSL has got is to create both a teacher and a youth council. And the idea is that we would have probably 8 to 12 members on the council, and that would be either international teachers and international students. And we would hope that as teachers, you would be able to help guide where TSL is able to provide you with the best support in teaching the topical issues of climate and sustainability in the countries and the regions that you're working in to best fit the curriculums or the teaching situations that you're in. So keep an eye out. We are going to be putting some more information up to the teachers that we work with over probably from September time about putting together a teachers council. We'd look for global representation on that because obviously we're working with around about 80 countries each year, and we'd love to have a broad representation. So if that's something you'd be interested in contributing to and helping to teach TSL, how we can help to better support you as teachers, what information we can provide you and how we can best get that to you and to the students that you work with, then we'd love to hear from you. So thanks. That was a great question, Elizabeth. Hopefully that answers your your question. Eva, your hands up, go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't stop but ask. Joe, I work with young adults on their mental health and learning challenges, and it seems with COVID coming in, before COVID also, there is this big anxiety in young adult population on global warming or anything about environment. They do care. Sometimes they can hide it so well, but they care a lot.
Yeah.
And I am wondering if there's a way to connect the mental well-being with the environmental well-being to
Absolutely.
make things faster, maybe.
Yeah,
What do you think
absolutely.
about
There's
that?
been quite a lot of research in that area of eco-anxiety, and showing that by being outdoors in nature, you know, you're dealing with two things at the same time, i.e. raising awareness about climate change, or getting people to take care of their environment, to think about what's happening outside, and also, you know, it just has that massive well-being impact. Often, if any of you are in eco schools, will see some of the marginalized, and you know, it links in with this aspect of social justice, because often the most marginalized children or young people or young adults or even older adults may not get access to opportunities, whereas they will be the ones who tend to perhaps join in with the eco club and get the most out of it. So we have a Museum of English Rural Life on our campus at Reading, and if you're ever in England and Reading, please come and see us. And the museum is really interesting in terms of the history of agriculture, because our campus is built on Huntley and Palmer ground. And anyway, in the museum, they have a lot of volunteer groups who are in there, so some from the Mind as well. So definitely it's all about getting people feeling better about themselves by being in the environment. I'm not sure if I answered the question that well, Eva, but it's definitely something I would love to work with you on.
Thanks very much. It was a great question, Eva. Any other questions or comments for Joe?
Thank you all so much for being here. And oh, Comfort has.
Oh yeah, Comfort, go ahead. You're able to unmute yourself.
Click the unmute the microphone, Comfort.
You're still muted.
Thank you. I've unmuted myself. Yeah, it's on mental well-being. I think there should be a way of helping the young people draw a borderline. Oftentimes, in trying to protect the environment, I've observed that some of them get obsessed with living sustainably, like eat this, don't eat that, don't do this. So at times they find it burdensome. So I think there should be there's a need to help them get, because last year during the TSL debate and awards, the summit last year, one of the speakers said, do what is comfortable for you. Don't get obsessed. Don't let it get you obsessed. And some of these young people too, you find out their parents don't understand the issue of environmental protection. So at times the parents, they are loggerheads with their parents. The parents don't really understand what they are saying. So if there's a way to also take this message to the parents of these children, or a way to teach these children to know how to manage their parents, it will also help their mental well-being. Thank you.
Thanks. No, can I just add to that? I think what that point you've made is so important. And we had a group of undergraduates that we did like a pre-pilot of this framework. And we talked about how some children may feel guilty because their parents are driving them to school, because that's the only possible way they can get them to school before they then have to get to work, etc. And then feeling guilty when everyone's saying, oh, you need to walk or go on a bike to school. And then so it's about talking to those children, and as you say, draw this line of, well, that's possible, but that's not. And then there was one of the students who was saying about she'd love to buy all eco-friendly food that's, you know, low impact, etc., but it costs more money. And as a student, she'd got less money, and how could she do that? And then that's causing that anxiety about what can I do, what can't I do? But it's about having those conversations and realizing you can't do everything, but there's little things you can do, and actually feeling good about the little things and not the everything. And if we all do our little bit, it all helps, and eventually things will change, because manufacturers, I believe, are one of the real culprits here, in terms of when I showed those two images of in the West, and all that packaging of the food that we eat is not sustainable. And with young people getting more active and having a voice, I think it's possible, but it's understanding there's a limit. Yeah.
There's a great quote, unfortunately I can't remember who it's by. It's not about everyone doing sustainability 100% perfectly, it's about everybody trying to be more sustainable. So yeah, it's impossible for everyone to live 100% sustainable. If we all try and make the effort, then that will have a big impact. So as you say, there's lots of issues that come into it, expenses and abilities and access, and a lot of that comes back to the equity and the inequality side of things. So
and it's getting them to think about that balance of what can we do, what can't we do, having that discussion. So you don't want to disempower people, you don't want to make them feel more anxious with this agenda. It's about thinking, well, okay, well, this is the situation we've got, what could we do, what's realistic, and every little project that you do should be looked at in that way. So thanks so much for joining me today. I'm off to London, which is really hot today. Apparently it's going to be 35 degrees in London.
Tropical temperatures.
Yeah, I'm off to 2 sessions to do with education and sustainability. So it's a really exciting day that you've started off my day in such a great way. So thank you, everyone. Please get in touch if you'd like to.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much for joining us, Jo. Really appreciate your sharing your skills, thoughts and experience with the teachers today, and I'll make sure to share your presentation with them. And do get in contact with Joanna.
Happy to collaborate, continue the collaboration, Kirsty.
Wonderful.
And Eva, and I mean, if there's resources we've got that you want to share, then we can collaborate on that. Brilliant.
Fantastic, wonderful. And we'll see you on Thursday. Jo's back to join us for a panel on Thursday looking at how addressing racial Indigenous inequalities to combat the climate change can be linked with education. So if you want to hear more from Joanna, come back and join us on
Have a great week.
Thursday.
It looks amazing programme, so really enjoy it. Take care.
Wonderful. Thanks, Joanna, for joining us. Joanna's going to disappear now. Have a safe trip to London.
Thank you.
Thank you.